See, the film, after the film, in 17 through 19, went all those places and was getting good response. And then people said, "You want let's keep this dialogue going." And so I wrote this book, uh, yeah, a black business book.
Okay.
And it really just took me about 3 months to do it. You know, Google, and then I went to the Library of Congress in D.C. My daughter was at Howard, so you know I went to visit her, and then I just snuck off one day and got a few more facts. And but I kept the same outline of what's in the film. And the outline in the film is, first of all, I wanted to kind of give an idea of how slaves learned how to read and write. You know, and so this is a quote by Booker T. Washington. It's the first quote in the book, and it goes, "I've learned that success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he has had to overcome while trying to succeed. Success waits patiently for anyone who has the determination and the strength to seize it." The one thing that we recognize in Booker T. Washington is that he was the forebearer of black business. Started the National Business League in 1990. He was the first president at Tuskegee Institute, and outside of Alabama, or out in Alabama, but outside of Montgomery. And he chronicled the rise of black business from that day. And so that's a quote by him. And so my book has a bunch of facts in it. It's over 204 facts. And so I made it where it was easy to read.
Okay.
I didn't try to give you any commentary, but just the fact. And then I put the reference in the back of the book so that you could say, because every people say, "I don't believe that." Okay, this is where I found it. And you might have a couple moments in that as I go forward. But the first fact that I put in there is that, number one, 1619 is when 20 African slaves first arrived in America on a ship commanded by Dutch seamen. The ship docked at a port in Jamestown, Virginia. That's when all that slavery thing kind of began, and it went from there. And I skipped some of the facts, but here's one. 1865 to 1877 was known as the Reconstruction Period, when the United States government enacted policies which gave former slaves various rights, including voting. As a result, many blacks were elected to political office like the state representative, governor, United States Congress, and United States Senate. Go back. The most common avenue to becoming free was to escape from one's master. Let's note that just getting to a non-slave town didn't mean one was totally free, because there were bounty hunters who searched for escapees. Once a slave got to a free territory, they could live a normal life under the status of fugitive or runaway. Here's a little known story. There was a lady named Harriet Jacobs who hated her master so much that in 1835 she ran away to her grandmother's house that was located on the same plantation. Harriet hid for 7 long years in an attic crawl space. Wow. Then one night in 1842, she fled the area and boarded a boat that was bound for Philadelphia. After her safe arrival, Harriet moved to New York, then Boston. She wrote Instances of the Life of a Slave Girl, a book about her ordeal. We got to get free. I had enough of this. I'm in a crawl space.
That's amazing.
There was a peephole that she looked out and saw her kids.
Oh my goodness.
So people say, well, how did they find her? I mean, they gave up. And that's where she was living. And then at the end of the night, she would get out and eat and exercise and stuff like that. That's the way that story goes. How about this one? William and Ellen Craft were married in Macon, Georgia in 1846. They were deeply in love and tired of being slaves. They came up with a brilliant escape plan. On December 21st, 1847, Miss Craft dressed up in men's clothing and wrapped her head in a bloody bandage to appear injured. William wore normal slave attire. She was very light-skinned, so she could pass for white. It just looked like a white man taking a slave on a trip. They boarded the train headed for Philadelphia, had some close calls, but arrived at their destination. See, because one of the misknown facts is that slaves could travel. You could travel up north with your slave. And I got more examples of that. But that was, I mean, that was definitely, that was a brilliant plan. And as the story goes, she sat next to one of her master's best friends, who just did not recognize her.
That's amazing.
Wow.
That's how she got free. Here's another one. Robert Smalls planned an escape with some other slaves in such a smooth way that they were able to take their families along. They were working on a Confederate ship, and as usual, the white slaves would dock, take off, and leave them aboard. Well, what happened was, check this out. So they said, okay, well, what? They do this every so often. When they leave, we leave. And stole the ship.
That's good.
And sailed up north. And had to sail past white Confederate people. Because, he had to go past the port and all that kind of stuff. So he had to dress up as he was the captain of the ship. But they had done this so often that he kind of, we smart people. So he figured out how to do it, how to sail past all of the, brigades and all that other stuff to freedom. So when he gets up to the port up north, him and his family and them, they get off the ship. The white people was like, "What's up?" He said, "Yeah, man, we got this ship for you. Can we go free?" He said, "Yeah." They shook hands and they left. They carjacked the boat.
First carjack.
They carjacked the boat. They boat jacked the car.
I think I heard that story, and they from making that voyage, they learned the signals that they had to give the different Confederate
each port,
soldiers
right?
at each port.
Exactly.
Because they had done that so many times, and that's how they were able to.
That's how they was able to do it. And this is the rest of it. So the one night in 1862, the sailors docked and deported. Small and the comrades went in action and took off. They made it to the pickup point, got the others and sailed to the northern port. Once they arrived, they handed over the ship, shook hands with the amazed Union officers, and went on their merry way.
That's all right.
And Africans had been coming over here in ships before slavery. I mean, there were Africans in Florida before the advent of slavery in America. So they knew they weren't ship people. They lived around nothing but water.
Yeah.
So they had to learn how to swim. Sure. Black people don't swim. We came from water. I mean, come on.
Sure, sure.
And we can commandeer a boat. Yeah.
Now, there were many ways that slaves got their freedom. There were some instances like, okay, how about this is good black history? There was not all the slave owners was the worst people. Some of them, the slaves really liked their owner. They didn't mistreat them. And some of them didn't want to leave slavery because the owner was kind of giving them a good deal, in some capacities. So there were a number of ways you could the owner would just let you go free, it would be in his will, and then he'd will you some land, that kind of thing. But another way was slaves could buy their freedom. I never knew that.
Oh yeah, I heard that.
So here's one is that there are many instances where slaves bought their freedom. The master could set whatever terms they desired, most arrangements being some amount of cash. Slaves could make money by working on Sundays, usually considered an off day. Bonus payments is a term used to describe how some slaves were paid for exceeding quota. Some slaves were paid a stipend because they worked for someone on behalf of their owner. Some slave owners allowed their slaves to operate a business and keep some of the profits. All right? You can buy your freedom.
I heard that after the master would pass, that some of their widows would marry slaves.
The what now?
That the widow of the master,
Right.
that she would take on a husband, it would be sometimes it was a slave.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. You want that, brother? So that we've always been, smart people, and we've always found a way.
Yeah.
So here's a guy that's a real. I mean, he was a bad dude. There's the incredible story of Frank McHorter, who was born a slave. His parents were a white man and a black woman. All right, there's a lot of that going on.
Oh, yeah.
His father allowed Frank to participate in the family business in various capacities. His father saw how easily he picked up on business matters. Frank became very astute, and from his hard work, earned enough money to buy his and his wife's freedom, and the freedom of so many others. The people nicknamed him Free Frank. And he did it so well, they named a town in his honor.
All right.
And what's the name of the town?
Newburgh in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia?
Yeah, that's right.
Really?
Yeah. He's that bad guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. How about this one? There's a guy named Stephen Smith. He bought his freedom for $50 at the age of 21 and worked in lumber yards. In 1822, years later, he started his own lumber and coal business. By the 1850s, Smith was grossing $100,000 in annual sales. His net worth was estimated at $500,000.
That was a whole lot of money back
I'm
then.
telling you, this is some good black history right here. This is
Yeah.
good black history.
Yeah, some good money now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No question. All right, so we wanted to learn and read and write. We understood, the premise of education. So how about this story? There was a guy named. There's a story about a slave named Zach Herbert who lived in Georgia. He was about the same age as his master's son. They played together at times. So by default, he was taught how to read and write. He understood the importance of an education. Zach said that when he ever got his freedom, he and had kids, he would make sure they got an education. Slavery ended. He found a way to hire a tutor for his 12 sons and daughters, and they each went to college.
Wow.
You get a good background, you can go to,
Yeah.
good things can happen. Get a good background, some beat downs, you going to school,
Yeah, it's a beat
that kind
down.
of thing.
Yes,
You got no choice. We're going to make it happen.
yes, indeed.
And you see it, I skip around, it flows in the book. But before the end of the Civil War, some white people in northern states were more open to teaching blacks. However, they still faced backlash. Miss Davis, a white girl, taught blacks at what was called a Sabbath school, usually held on Sunday prior to church. It said that some white people donated books and supplies, but when racists heard of what she was doing, they did what they could to shut her down. See, there's always been some white folks that was helpful.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
A few.
Let me give you an example. This is crazy. I was in Salt Lake last week. Went to the Sundance Film Festival, and they got word I was, some people got word I was there, so they invited me to a Black Lives Matter meeting and asked me to speak. Right at the Black Lives Matter meeting, it was 17 people there. It was 5 blacks.
Black Lives Matter.
At Black Lives Matter, there was 12 white people. What's so crazy about Black Lives Matter is that they say in their talk and everything, white folks can't run nothing. You can come up with an idea, but a black person got to institute it. That's their premise.
Okay.
Now you got 12 white people here, and they can't do nothing but help.
It's gotta be one of the whitest states in the country, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure. I was so happy to get.
Yeah.
Yeah, Utah. Yeah, I'm so happy.
Yeah.
So there's always been white folks that have been helpful. Here's a fact: before the Civil War ended, some city leaders in Oberlin, Ohio, had liberal views on public education for blacks. They believed that all races could attend school. They even opened a Liberty School for adults who were former slaves in Oberlin, Ohio. So they really considered the first college, Oberlin College, to actively accept blacks. This is like 1835, somewhere around there. Wow. And I've been to Oberlin. I spoke at Oberlin. That was pretty. It's a little small town, and they still have that mantra. They got historical markers, and that's what they say. They like that, right? There was an effort to educate former slaves in Virginia and North Carolina under the leadership of the Union General Benjamin Franklin Butler. Benjamin appointed Kingsman as chief of the Department of Negro Affairs and directed him to ensure that blacks could receive an education. Former slaves were taught carpentry, weaving, shoemaking, and other trades. As the time went on, there were more than 60 teachers and 3,000 students. So the government did, once slavery ended, they instituted some programs for slaves, because there was some consciousness, you know what I mean? That, oh man, we got all these black people, they can't read and write, we got to do something, to help the government life get better. And so that was one example. Another example was that Howard in D.C. was actually founded by the General Howard, who was the first general to help with the Reconstruction Period. And so he established that the school is named in his honor.
Doesn't Howard have a certain designation by the government as a HBCU? I heard, because my son went to Howard too, that something I heard about with the government, that they get certain funding that's different than others because of their affiliation.
Really?
That's what.
Could be. So there was always been some black people that, how you doing? Just come on in, join on in. There's always been some black people that have been smart and, making a move and stuff like that. So here's one story. In 1909, this guy's a doctor. Now 1909, about 30 years after slavery ended. He's a doctor, PhD doctor. Dr. Lawrence C. Jones founded a boarding school for blacks for grades 9 to 12 in Piney Wood, Mississippi. He named it the Piney Woods Country Life School. His goal was to educate sons and daughters of black sharecroppers. It is said that many times racists tried to close the school. He even faced a lynch mob on one night. However, Dr. Jones was so smooth, he talked his attackers into sparing his life and even asked for donations. Dr. Jones saw a need for a school for blind children. In 1929, he established the Mississippi Blind School for Negroes at the Piney Wood School and hired Miss Martha Louise as teacher and principal. Now that's smooth, isn't it? They're about to kill me, and don't kill me, man. Why you want to do that?
Is it still there?
Yeah, it's still there.
Yes, no.
Yeah, it's still there. As a matter of fact, I'm hoping to go down there and speak. Yeah, I sent them a book.
Oh, right.
Is Oberlin primarily black
No,
to this day now?
no, not at all. How about this? A lot of people don't know this. I usually tell people, I said slaves went to college. They say, how's that possible? Well, there were 3 HBCUs open before slavery ended.
Really?
People didn't know that. Cheney in Pennsylvania was founded in 1837.
Wow.
Lincoln in Pennsylvania was founded in 1854, and Wilberforce in Wilberforce, Ohio was founded in 1856. And then the year that slavery ended in 1865, several black colleges was founded that same year. Virginia Union University was founded in 1865, Bowie State, 1865, Atlanta University, 1865.
Now Wilberforce, that's where Pastor Stewart went. And Lincoln University, Kwame Nkrumah, first president of Ghana,
Is that right?
went to Lincoln.
Went to Lincoln?
Ain't that something?
You're smart enough to go to college?
Well, why do you think they fought so hard to keep you from learning? Because they didn't have the ability to do it.
Yeah.
You don't fight, you always look at the means that your oppressor goes to, the extremes, to see how much of a threat you are.
That's right.
If you weren't a threat, they wouldn't have done all the things that they continue to do today,
That's right.
because we do have the capacity to.
Absolutely.
Shaw University was founded in 1865, and in 1881 opened a 4-year medical program. In 1888 opened a law school. Shaw is considered the first HBCU to accept women.
And my wife is a proud Shaw alum.
Is that right?
Wow. And I didn't know anything about Shaw
Uh-huh.
until I married her.
Okay. Oh,
And then I
something.
wanted the black homecoming experience.
Oh, wow.
And she had never been back. So I said, guess what we doing this fall? Where are we going? We going to Shaw.
Going to Shaw.
And had a great time, and she's
Yeah.
reconnected with her friends and roommates.
Oh,
And,
nice.
yeah, it's a from someone who went to 2 PWIs. It's nice to have that
I'm
experience.
sure.
I wanted to share something about William Wilberforce. Wilberforce is named after, I don't want to interrupt the
Yeah, no,
conversation,
no,
I
no.
can do that at the end if you want.
Okay, well, let's keep rolling then, I guess. So how about this? In 1850, Harvard Medical School accepted 3 black students, one of whom, 1850, you going to Harvard, right? I told you I'm going to give you some good black history now. Let's get back to that. So one was Martin Delaney. However, the pressures from fellow white students, Harvard rescinded their acceptance. And then this is my only commentary, one of the few, right? It can be accepted if they were smart enough to get Harvard, they found another college that would accept them. I ain't put much commentary, but I did figure I better put that there. They go to Harvard, and then they say, "No, you can't come. We accepting you in Harvard." But how about this? George Lewis Ruffin earned a law degree from Harvard in 1869. Also in 1869, Robert Tanner Friedman graduated from Harvard Dental School. In 1870, Richard Theodore Greener and George F. Grant graduated from Harvard with undergraduate degrees. I don't know if you knew this, W.E. Du Bois graduated from Harvard with a doctorate in 1895.
Wow.
Carter G. Woodson graduated from Harvard. That's Harvard. You real smart. You real smart. 1869, slavery ended 4 years earlier than that, and you at Harvard, man. Something to do.
It showed that it made them feel inferior to know that black people were just as intelligent as they were.
Oh, it's no question. Or more so.
Or more. Yeah.
Especially with what you had to overcome.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But you know what, I think they've always known
Yes.
that we were highly intelligent.
that's why they always-
I don't think that was ever an issue.
Never.
But I think to try to get us to believe that we were not, so they could easily manipulate us. But they've
And they
always
did.
known that we were brilliant
And they
people.
did.
That's why they fought so hard to keep us from getting education.
That's what I'm talking about. They
Yeah.
knew what a threat we were from their standpoint.
Could I make a mention on that? I remember when I went to college, now this is last century. When I was,
Sounds longer than it
right,
really is.
but I remember when I would tell people where I graduated from, I mean, I went to Adrian College, it's no big deal. But people were surprised, they always looked at you as like, oh, you're a poor black girl from the city of Chicago. You know, oh, you graduated from Adrian? Who? You know, like they're always surprised. It's like, well, why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, but it's amazing.
Well, you can work on somebody's mind, and when you get it right, the body will follow. That's why you have to have open and you know, discussions and books and things, so that you know that you can say things and clear your mind. Because many people are still under that type of mindset, even today.
Today,
Even
of
today.
course.
It's not surprising when you know you're from Chicago, so this smart people.
That's what he's.
That's a sidebar. Yeah, that's a sidebar. So the government enacted the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which declared racial discrimination in public places illegal. So they trying to do some right thing, but didn't last long. In 1883, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed the ruling and declared the Civil Rights Act of 1875 unconstitutional, which legalized the institution of separate facilities and accommodations. It wasn't until 1954. That's when we had all that civil rights stuff going down, right?
Right.
All them years, nothing could happen.
University Board of Education.
Yep. Some 71 years later, that the Supreme Court made a ruling that reversed that decision on segregation. The case is the famous Brown versus Board of Education, which led to the integration of public education. All them years, they wouldn't do anything.
There's something else. But one thing I want to throw in too, though, we're talking about the 1800s, but if, white people knew how smart we were right from the beginning, because if we can build pyramids,
Oh, no question.
we're talking about trigonometry and all that stuff that come into play, right?
All that,
For those structures, and they're still standing.
Right.
right.
So I mean, I don't know why they would be so surprised. I think because it was just such a beat down and they had drained everything out of you.
Right.
But you had to know it was gonna come back eventually,
Ah.
once the freedoms and stuff was allowed, in this country and around the world.
Yeah.
It's still happening, because most of the things that was created and invented for us to make our lives easier was created by black folks.
That's right.
Because you had to.
That's right.
And when you think about the pyramids, it was lined up to the North Star. It lit up. Now, I mean, just think you're building a structure. Each brick is over a ton, and it's in the exact middle of the earth. And then it's lined up to the North Star, which means every 3,600 years. What academics do you need to know to do all that?
Right.
To build that one structure?
That's right.
Okay?
So what happened was, okay, now you discriminating against us, right? All them years. Here go a black guy, he says, his name is Victor Hugo Green. He was a mailman in New York. He saw a need to publish a directory of businesses that welcome blacks. So from 1836 to 1936 to 1966, Green's publication, the Negro Motorist Green Book, or simply the Green Book, was an annual guidebook for African American travelers. It also identified towns to give blacks trouble and listed safe travel routes. Green received help from other mailmen throughout the country to gather information and sell advertisements.
Oh, wow.
So that movie, that Green Book, really wasn't what it was about.
Right, right.
That really wasn't what it was about. That black guy was a musician and he did travel, and the white guy helped him. But they didn't really talk about the book.
They didn't talk about the book.
Yeah, they didn't really talk about
They
the detail.
Yeah, they just mentioned
Yeah,
it.
Just
they might have
mentioned
mentioned
it.
it or something, but the
Right.
book, and his family is still alive. His family's still alive.
Right, yeah.
And he died not, from what I gather, 20 some odd
And he
years
was
ago.
very well educated too. I mean, he was a classical musician.
The guy in the movie.
Yeah.
The
In the
real
movie.
person.
Yeah.
The real person who he's portraying.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
very well educated.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it didn't focus on the book per se.
Right,
right.
A lot of people complained about that.
But the
Well, they
book was
did.
so much, but for me, you became familiar or aware of the book.
Oh, yeah, it did do
So
that.
That did
No,
that
no,
to me,
no
because
question.
I didn't
yeah.
know about the book.
Right.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was just word of mouth when people traveled to the South or wherever
Yeah.
they were going. I thought it was just word of mouth, where you can stay here, you can stop here, but it was actually a book that was published.
Yeah,
that's
and
what
I'm
it
sure
is.
with some word of mouth too.
Well, yeah.
They call you on the cell phone and say, man, you wanna go down that street?
But that did bring my attention to that was a book that was published, because I just watched portions of it. I didn't really watch the movie.
And when you traveled south, you took food with you.
That's
Yeah,
right.
your own food.
Because you couldn't stop everywhere to eat.
And he wanted once,
You had those
there's
chicken sandwiches on fried chicken on white bread.
Yeah.
a copy of the book online, you could get it as a PDF, you could get the whole Green Book. It's on
Oh, is that
PDF.
right?
And they have a display about the whole Green Book and the story at the new African American Museum in DC.
No, really?
Really?
Nice
Yeah.
exhibit about it.
I was gonna say Black History Month, just a sidebar. you talk about food, you know, beans and cornbread does the shoebox, lunches and dinners during Black History Month. So you can be served in a shoebox, and it gives the history. So make sure you guys go there. It's a wonderful experience.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can have your lunch served in that capacity.
And where is this?
Beans and cornbread. Yeah, they've been doing it for years. Yeah. Just FYI, Monday is buy one, get one free.
So, you know, we were found, you know, we were, you know, coming together over the, you know, all those years and, you know, developing and living in our own districts, you know, and now we're growing districts. We can read and write. Segregation is telling us we can't do this. So here's a story of, a lot of people might not know, in Weeksville, New York. Weeksville, New York was formed in 1837 by James Weeks, a black man. The town is what is now known as Bedford, Bed-Stuy region of Brooklyn, New York.
Bed-Stuy.
Bed-Stuy. Found by a black man. The Freedmen's Torch newspaper was considered the country's first black newspaper, was headquartered in this city. How about this one? Central Park. You heard that, right? Black people lived in Central Park, and they tore it down and made a park out of it.
Yeah. Oh, they always do that. That obelisk is from Egypt. That's in Central Park. What is it? Something Cleopatra's Point or something it's called.
So that was
They stole it from there.
and they took it.
Like most of the places.
Yeah.
Eminent domain.
You sure can.
Here's another one. This is a good story right here about this one. African Town in Alabama was founded in 1866.
Yes.
It has a unique history that even though importing slaves was ruled illegal in 1860. See, what happened is let me stop right there. And what happened is they was importing slaves up to 1860. And, you know, again, the conscience of the white folks said, hold on, we gonna stop that. Still gonna have slaves, and then we already reproducing and stuff like that anyway. We got enough of them here. So we're gonna stop importing them. So this one white ship, he does it anyway, illegally.
Right.
So he comes here, the captain brought some slaves to America. Just 5 years later, those slaves received their freedom, and within 1 year, they established their own town in Alabama.
And they found the ship.
Yep.
They found the ship.
They found the
just
ship.
recently.
Yeah.
I have it on my, I can't get online, I would tell you, it's difficult. But yeah, there was a story, National Geographic, that actually showed it. And the town was very glad, because it was really having some, depressed.
Right.
And when they found the ship, it just, yeah, because they knew that's where their ancestors came. But they actually found the ship and brought it to the shore, to shoreline, so it's visible.
Here's another one. The Haiti community of Durham, North Carolina is in honor of the South American country of Haiti, considered the first free independent black republic in the Western Hemisphere. In the early 1900s, the founders of North Carolina Mutual Insurance Company made a huge impact on the city. The company became one of America's largest black-owned business. Many black-owned companies sprang up in the district. For example, there was Lincoln Hospital, a theater, a library, hotels, and over 200 businesses of all types. The district was home to North Carolina Central University. That's really, and they called it Black Wall Street.
Yes.
Durham, North Carolina. We jamming. You give us a minute, we gonna come together and do some stuff, man. You can't hold us back. We gonna come and do some stuff.
Where you can see.
So here now I'm gonna start talking about, and what I did was in my book and in my movie, you know, because again I'm on this positive tip, right? So I'm gonna tell you how we learn how to read and write. I'm gonna give you a little bit about, some examples of that, and then I'm gonna tell you what white folks did to us. Getting mad. Get mad. And so how about this one? On March 8th, 1909 in Birmingham, Kentucky, roughly 100 white people decided to raid the black neighborhood, shooting people and killing 3. Many black people were driven from their land, totaling more than 60 acres of farmland and 21 city lots. That's 1909. They just got mad. We wasn't doing nothing to them.
Right.
Well, they did.
Just got mad. How about this one? You know this story. It says one of the most devastating massacres. That's what they call it in Tulsa. It wasn't a riot. We wasn't rioting. It was a massacre. We wasn't doing nothing. Yeah, it was a riot. It was a massacre. So in American history, June 1st, 1921, when a racist white saw a black guy kissing a white girl in the elevator, he ran out screaming that the black guy was raping a white girl. White folks were already jealous of the thriving black community, nicknamed Black Wall Street in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma. There were plenty of well-to-do blacks in the community, rich from oil dividends and successful businesses. These white rulers just went crazy, killing nearly 200 innocent blacks, no matter their age. They set fire on most of the buildings, which left nearly 8,000 people homeless. It was incredible that they had so much hatred. There's testimony they used dynamite and shot people whose arms were raised in surrender. The craziest fact that no one was ever convicted of a crime.
No one ever. And the one lady that was still alive from this just died a year or two ago.
Is that right?
The last one.
Yeah.
The last one. But they did all their business there. Doctor, dentist, lawyer, you know, shopping, retail, shoes, whatever
Thanks.
you needed, it was right there. And that's what they didn't like.
How about this
And
one
my
though?
people were like that. They only shopped in certain areas with their own. You know, people of color, not necessarily African people, but Indians, you know, whatever else was there. They always shopped within their own. They always, and so, and you can see what happened. And they said the only way we can get rid of this is to burn it down.
I got a fact for you that's gonna blow your mind though. Oh boy. Check this out. Okay, I told you I was in Tulsa, right? And showed my movie in Tulsa. I was introduced by the lady whose grandfather was the black guy. Her great grandfather, you know, it might be one or two over, right? I was introduced by her. Hold on, check this out.
And she was a young person at the time.
Check this out. She tells me they was dating. And once all that commotion happened and he got out of jail, they got married in Massachusetts.
Really?
See, what would happen is he would, you know, he was dating her. I mean, he fell in love with the white girl. That's what the daughter tells me. You can't, you know, kind of dictate who you fall in love with.
Right.
So he did. He fell in love with her. So he'd be in the back of that. She the elevator operator going up and down, you know. So he'd be in the back of the elevator. He'd kiss on her and grab on her, whatever, right? She cool with that. 1921. So then when somebody jumped, he'd jump in the back of the elevator. This one time, the elevator opened too fast. She hollered and screaming, "He my boyfriend," putting her life on the line. They ain't want to hear that. They got married in Massachusetts.
It is 1920.
Wow.
Yep. 21.
1921. I sad to say, but it was close to slavery days.
Yep.
People's mindsets had not changed.
Yeah.
They still, that evil was still so prevalent. That's all it is.
Yeah, it's all.
Exactly.
They still like that today.
Yes, they are. I mean, that's a taught mindset.
It's a mindset that
really
it's so
is.
important that you understand the mindset. My mother used to tell me when she was in elementary school, they taught them about Black history, about Africans, and then when they about Egyptians, and then when they got to middle school, they were taught, oh, you don't want to have nothing to do with the people, you know. So the mindset had changed.
Oh, yeah.
So they had a school education where they were taught about African and ancestry, but then when they got to a certain level, that was cut off because they were all surprised. Well, what happened? So you know, with that in mind, that just shows you how this kind of situation could happen.
Oh, sure.
You know, could happen. Both my mother and father are both from Oklahoma.
Y'all got a sidebar about Black Wall Street. You heard of the group called the Gap Band?
Right.
Yeah,
That's
right,
what
right,
it started.
yeah.
That's where they got their name from,
Yeah.
Greenwood, Archer, and Pine.
That's right.
That's
Black Wall Street.
Where they showed my movie, that was on the corner. It was showed in the library in Tulsa, and it was right. I took a sign. It was, you know, it was just nighttime and I couldn't get it right, but I was on that corner.
Right.
So they not just that they did riots and massacres, and you all would know this, and as I know it, because it happened here in Detroit.
Right.
They ran them freeways right through many of our districts.
Oh, yeah.
On purpose.
Right.
Division.
On purpose.
So in 19, it went right through it. So how about this one? In 1944, the Federal Highway Act offered to pay 50% of the construction cost to build a highway. Then in 1956, the government upped the ante to cover 90% of the construction costs. Many urban cities took advantage of this funding. Many politicians saw this as an opportunity to destroy black neighborhoods and make white suburbs more accessible.
Yeah.
It is said that urban planner Robert Moses came up with the ideal, and in some instances, city records show how they intentionally constructed the highway to go smack through black areas.
Yeah.
What was that? Paradise Valley, that's what it was called. Paradise Valley, that's what they did.
It was easy to get to.
And that's where
So,
75 ran through.
Yes.
And also 96, because I remember my aunt lived there. It was a huge
Paradise
community.
Valley.
We used to go visit as children.
Yeah, my parents,
And
that's
we
where they
remember the
lived.
construction, she had to move, and she was so upset
Yeah.
that she had to give up her house
Eminent domain.
and move.
Oh, and if they find no other way, then they'll
Intimate
they'll
domain.
use that.
So I'm glad you said that because I've always heard of Black Paradise. And I knew that it was destroyed, but I never knew where it was.
Those
Yeah,
areas-
Lafayette Park.
Don't
And
they
they
have a
have
marker?
restaurants.
There's
Yeah,
a marker
yeah.
down near Fort
Everything.
Stadium and all that area, yeah.
Yeah,
And it
Lafayette
was
Park.
thriving.
Well,
I mean, it was, and they were like, just like I said, Black Wall Street, they had dentists and medical doctors and
Everything,
lawyers
yeah.
and
And
shopping.
when was it?
I was a little girl, because I remember my mother talking about it, so.
It was in the 50s when the freeway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a little girl.
Started, but they finished, I think, around 1965.
Yeah, they were devastated by it. My mother was very upset.
Yeah, I got a picture where you can
They
see
were very
the
upset.
before and after.
Yeah.
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 So, okay, that's enough negative. I ain't doing, you heard the massacres, the riots, the freeway. So let me go back a little bit here. Slaves had business. For a slave to start a business, they had to have their own master's approval and support, i.e. time, equipment, supplies. If the master felt their slave could make them some money, it might allow the slave to take on outside assignments. The master could send their slave to work for someone. In some instances, word spread about the slave's skills, and white would call their master to inquire about hiring. All right? This is a unique story right here. There's a lady named Elizabeth Keckley, was based in St. Louis, was a very talented dressmaker. Her owner allowed her to travel north by herself to secure work and then pay him a percentage of her earnings. Word about her talent spread throughout cities like Washington, D.C. and New York. She made enough money to purchase her freedom. She moved to Washington, D.C. and became the dressmaker to the First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln and other elite women. Her autobiography, Behind the Scenes, was published in 1866. I'm gonna let you go. You gotta get, but see, they'll let them go, but they gotta have some guarantees. You know,
Something.
somebody up there got to sign for you. Something like that. They'll let you go up north, cause it's a money thing. It's always a
It's all about money.
Greenbacks. Greenbacks, yeah.
dollar bills, y'all.
Here's another one. He was born a slave. William Johnson got his freedom about age 11 and worked with his brother-in-law, James Miller, who was a barber. Miller bought the barber shop in 1830 for $300. They say he taught other blacks to trade. Here's another one. Lansford Lane dreamed of freedom. He grew older and with his master's permission, sold fruit by the basket. He did well enough to buy his freedom. He once said it took roughly 6 years to save enough money. William Troy became a master boot and shoemaker. His master, a white woman named Jane, allowed William to hire out his services. Business was so good that even after he saved enough money to buy his freedom, he didn't, because he would have to relocate. In those days, there was a law that a newly freed slave had to leave the state within 1 year or be subject to be recaptured. Ain't that something? He said, I don't even want my freedom. I'm doing too well. Ain't that a story?
I know.
Wow.
I don't even want my freedom.
Right.
I'm going to stay right here.
Save my money.
Yeah, I'm going to save my money.
Some didn't even know they were slaves.
Hey,
Come
like,
to
shoot,
Harriet
man.
Tubman.
So the federal government did some things to help, you know, life better. So in 1865, the federal government established the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company. It was created for black veterans, former slaves, and their families to increase their savings. It also enabled numerous black community organizations to increase their financial strength and expand their activities. The bank depositors included many societies, churches, charities, and other private organizations. The bank operated until about 1874. There was some corrupt things, that's what closed it, and then the
Yeah,
white
there
folks
was some
got it.
corruption.
Yeah, there was some corruption.
That was kind of tied to the
Yeah.
40 acres, so the 40 acres didn't come, and the
Yeah.
bank was never supported by the
Yeah.
government.
It's always something.
It's always something tricky.
Yeah, some trick to it.
Yeah, some little underlying something.
To keep you from.
For the sisters in the room, how about this? Y'all might not have heard of Maggie Lena Walker, became a charter president of the St. Luke Penny Savings Bank in 1902, located in Richmond, Virginia. So there's other facts in the book. But what happened was she rose to the president of one of them benevolent societies. You heard of some of them funny names? I can't pronounce them, you know. Our Lady of the Free, Scorpions, and all that kind of stuff, right? So what they was, see, black folks was coming together.
Yes.
And they come up with these secret societies, and you got to pay a penny or 2 pennies or something there to be members. Now they getting some money. So this lady right here, there are other facts in the book, but she started a department store, a newspaper, in 1902. Oh, they got landmarks in her name, Maggie Lena Walker. Oh, here it is. Maggie Lena Walker rose to the position of Grand Secretary of the Independent Order of St. Luke, a fraternal organization headquartered in Richmond, Virginia.